All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today at our Product Manager Roundtable. My name is Manasi Aurora, and I'm one of the co-founders of Costart, and will be moderating the panel today. We have 5 amazing women in product management joining us today, and they will be speaking to their experiences as a woman in product management and how they made their way to their current roles. This event will be more of a Q&A style event. So I'll be asking our panelists a series of questions, and we will reserve the last 15 minutes for the audience to ask their questions. You can feel free to add questions in the chat box on Zoom, and our panelists will be happy to address them either in the last 15 minutes of the call or through the chat as we go along. Cool. So before we get started, I'm going to quickly give an intro to Costart. So quick intro on Costart. I'm a co-founder of Costart, and we basically wanted to create a virtual community for women trying to break into tech, business, and venture capital. We create content through newsletters, podcasts, and blogs to spread resources to women on how to break into the industry. So with that being said, I'd like to allow the panelists to introduce themselves. We can start off with Nikita.
Hi everyone, my name is Nikita. I am currently an international strategy product manager at Adobe within the Creative Cloud business unit. I have held previous internships in product at Symantec and VMware, and I am very passionate about and committed to creating international experience better for all of our customers at Adobe and throughout the world. So yeah, and I went to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where I studied economics and computer science and received a certificate in technology commercialization. And I also had the chance to study international economics at the Vienna University of Business and Econ in Austria. Thank you for having me, Monsi.
All right, Deb, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm Deb. I'm currently working at NVIDIA as a product manager, also doing part-time grad school at Carnegie Mellon. Prior to this, I was working with one of the other panelists, Juhi, as an APM at Visa. And before that, I did my undergrad in computer science from Davis. Also worked in a lot of software engineering internship positions in college at Tesla Ripcord and as a Kleiner Perkins engineering fellow. I'm also working with Mansi on Costart. We both started this with a group of other women last year as a purely newsletter driven community, and this year we branched out to events and loving the community so far. Also, I'm also a part of Dorm Room Fund's female founder cohort this summer, building side projects, so that's exciting. So yeah, excited to be on this panel.
Cool. Juhi, you want to go?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Juhi. I actually do know quite a few panelists too. I know Deb from Visa, as she mentioned, and that's where I work currently. I'm an associate product manager there. I graduated from UIUC in 2019 and started Visa almost immediately in August. And before then, I had a few internships with software engineering roles and then kind of narrowed my way down to product management. I'm so glad to be part of this talk. I think it's super important. It's great that we're putting it together. So thank you for having me, guys. Otherwise, not much more to add. I majored in cognitive psychology, so I had that focus, and that's why I leaned into product management. And I'm super excited to talk about it today. So looking forward to it.
All right, Sri.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shri. I'm a product manager at Slack currently. I also went to school at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, graduated with computer science and math. While I was in college, I kind of meddled around with like different software engineering internships before finding a bit more of my passion in the product management space. So after interning at Microsoft, I took a full-time role there, and now I'm currently in San Francisco at Slack. Thank you for this conversation. I'm excited.
Awesome. Mishta?
Hey everyone, I'm so excited that you guys are all here, and I think this will be a super cool conversation. A little bit of background on me. I'm currently an associate product manager at Google. I've been working here for the past year. I work on Google Lens, which is a product that deals with AR and kind of allowing users to search what they see. Before that, I had interned as an APM as well at Google on Chrome. And then before that, I'd done a couple of software engineering internships at Apple and Vimeo. And I graduated in 2019 from Stanford, and I studied computer science. But throughout the way, I probably should have been like a psych and computer science major because I just took so many psych classes. And I think that like my natural interest for psychology as well as tech and CS is kind of what led me to eventually become a product manager. But yeah, excited to talk to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. Before we get started on the panel, I just want to reinforce the audience. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box on Zoom, and our panelists will be answering them throughout the call and additionally to the 15 minutes. Awesome. So let's get into it. So my first question for the panelists would be, what was your personal journey to product management and what made you most passionate about it as opposed to other roles in tech? Maybe we could have Juhi start.
Yeah, sure. So I kind of took a long route to get into product management, but I got there, I think, around junior year. So I started off, I was really interested in cognitive psychology, cognitive science. I think Nish had mentioned it before, but there is definitely an overlap when you study anything to do with software, and then you have that psychology, human interaction part. And that was really interesting to me. I had interned at an AI cognitive computing firm in San Francisco, I think my junior year summer, between my junior and senior year. And there was this part where I was ideating with the head researcher about a product that we were trying to give to our clients. And I really enjoyed that process, and I thought it was really great. So I wanted to see if there was a role in tech that would allow me to create a product or talk about it and be part of that ideation stance and really like understand more about what it involved. And I liked so many different aspects of doing that. So I was just like, I need something that encompasses everything. And that's kind of why I tried out product management. Oh, sorry, I said junior year, I meant sophomore year. I did that at sophomore year. And then junior year, I was reaching out for opportunities where I could shadow a product manager or be an associate or something, just anything to do with product and trying to get my foot in the door. I got a really great opportunity to shadow someone who was working at a previous company that I was at. And she was a new product manager there. And she was also starting up her own company and the CEO of her own product. So I got to work on both with her, learned so much more from her. So it was good to also have like a woman mentor in product itself. And then I kind of knew from doing that and product school, which is this organization which hosts a bunch of product management workshops, and they have weekly seminars where product managers go to speak. I think encompassing all of those into my junior year summer, I was like, this is a really great field for me. I definitely want to approach it as a career. And that's how I applied in. So that kind of got me down. It was a long ways, but we got there.
Awesome. Go ahead, Sri.
I had a bit of more of like an accidental approach with product management. Like I mentioned, I kind of did a lot of like software engineering internships when I was in college. I worked at like all sorts of like insurance firms to high frequency trading and a lot of like math oriented companies. And it was not until I was talking to a recruiter at the Microsoft booth at UIUC when I was kind of talking about my passions, talking about how I really liked taking like a problem solving approach and like a 10,000 foot view of something before I actually get into the nitty gritty details. And that's when I started getting the concept of, oh, there's this thing called product management. There's this concept of this person who kind of plays that role of problem solving and taking in different inputs. So the PM internship at Microsoft was my first approach into PM. And from there, it was just kind of like falling in love with like a job that I felt like was meant for me.
Yeah, I can add to that. So I think my experience was more of accidental as well. I was studying computer science at Davis, and I was obsessed with like deep learning and software engineering, and I was doing a bunch of software internships, but a lot of them weren't fulfilling at the time, and most of the times because I was going very deep into the code, and what I liked doing was more of the ideation and the prototyping and the UX design part of it. Davis does have a design minor, so I was pursuing that also on the side, taking classes. So I was kind of building up my skills that I'd say was leading towards the PM role, but I wasn't really sure what PM entails, just because I think the word or the role has a negative, not negative, but like a wrong connotation to it with the term manager. The way I see it is like it's just product. It's like the management part as an early level. You're not really managing many people or anyone, to be honest. It's more of like you're coming up with the business requirements. You're coming up with the product ideas, the design, working with people, engineering to implement that. So I think that was one thing that I learned that was negatively or differently portrayed in blogs or media or the way people talk about it. So once I knew that, I realized this was my dream role. So what I did was, in my last internship as a junior, I was working at Ripcord as a software engineer, but I took on the role of, or I volunteered to do their reprototype their UI for a bunch of their robots. It was more of an HCI project. So based on that experience, I added that to my resume. And I think through my interviews that I did over fall, a bunch of associate product manager interviews, I was able to talk about that experience and the previous design experience that I had. I also added that I have software engineering experience and a CS background, so that definitely helped. But I definitely agree that it's not a requirement to break into PM with those backgrounds. But for me, I was focusing more on like a data PM or a technical PM role. And Visa, I was very late in the game, actually. I started preparing my summer of junior year, and only like late fall, when I think all the applications closed, was I aggressively applying. And somehow Visa was recruiting late. So I think I got lucky with that, and I joined Visa, and then I realized I think my passions fall more in more for a technical PM role. So I joined NVIDIA as a deep learning product manager, and I'm working on a very technical deep learning product. So it's like everything that I wanted to do is like work with deep learning and in product kind of combined into this one role that I'm working in currently.
I can go next and also maybe answer one of the questions that popped up in the chat about the difference between the product designer UX role and PM, because I think that what drew me into product management really was sort of this fascination with UX design and kind of like trying to understand how the products and apps that I was using changed the way that I thought about the world, because this was like way back in like 2014, 2013, I was like addicted to Facebook, constantly deactivating my account and reactivating, and just like could not figure out why I could not quit this site. But I also I found it beautiful back then. At least the website is very ugly now to me. But I like always had this fascination with the products I used, the activities that I participated in, like how and why I was drawn to certain things and not drawn to others. But that was just like a personal interest of mine. And then I got to college and knew that I had this like interest in computer science because I was such like a tech user, if I guess that's like what I call myself. But I started taking a few other classes in other disciplines. I took like a philosophy class, a linguistics class, a psychology class, and I realized that there was this major that kind of encompassed all four of these different disciplines. And I realized that like I was a person who wouldn't be satisfied just doing computer science alone. So I started pursuing this path of like symbolic systems and putting my hands and feet into everything, whether it was like linguistics, English, psychology, like everything. And then I that summer, out of like everything that I was pursuing, the only thing that was actually like hiring an intern who was a freshman was like the tech field, and specifically like software engineering roles. So I stumbled into the software engineering role internship at Vimeo. But it was unique in that because Vimeo is such a small company, it's only like 250 people. They're so focused on film and like indie like film development, and everyone at the company like cares about this in their own kind of life. Like there were a bunch of people who created their own films and kind of like developed them on the side, even though their day job was a software engineer at Vimeo. I realized that like they brought this type of like passion and excitement to their job, and they weren't just sitting there coding. They were like taking their knowledge and kind of their understanding of what people wanted to watch, what people wanted to sort of film, what people really who were in this sort of like product space really cared about and really were excited by, and then they built products that actually met those needs. I realized that it was like the building products that meet needs part that I most was excited about, and like coding just seemed like an ends to a means. Ends to a means. I think that's, I don't remember the phrase. But basically after that summer, I was like convinced that like product management was the role for me, because someone told me that if you're interested in getting to meet user needs, like the PM role is for you. And so I kind of like, I think I looked up product school. I looked up a bunch of things online, sort of realized that if you wanted to be a PM, you would probably have to be in industry as a software engineer for like 10 years. This was also the advice that someone gave me. And I was like, okay, I'll just be a software engineer for a couple of years, and later down the line, I'll be a PM. Long story short, realized, and we'll go into this later, there's something called the APM program that exists at a bunch of tech companies, and was able and lucky enough to get an internship doing an APM role, and kind of just like fell in love with it. So didn't answer the question. Basically, in one word, UX designer versus PM. UX designer is much more concerned with making mocks that, like literally drawing out mocks and creating mocks that users will actually see. And sometimes product designers can also be involved in crafting the UX experience, like the user flow of a certain app. Whereas a product manager, you might draw mocks that are later transformed into something pretty using like actual UX software, but you're usually not the one doing the designs yourself. You're much more focused on trying to uncover user needs and trying to decide what features might actually solve for those needs. And in doing that, you might think about potential mocks that could help solve for the needs, but you're not the one usually, at least ever, doing the actual mocks.
Yeah, I can go ahead and jump in. Just talking about my personal journey into PM. It kind of similarly kind of stumbled into it. I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I was about a sophomore in college. I was pursuing a very multidisciplinary degree in both business econ and in computer science. So I wanted to find a career path that let me explore both of those passions of mine. So it kind of started out where I saw this. I obviously, as part of a CS major, you're creating apps, you're creating websites, and I wanted to also not just create them, but show how they can provide value in people's lives. So when I was looking around for stuff to do after my sophomore year during the summer, I stumbled upon my first product internship, and I reported to a senior PM at a smaller company, LifeLock, which has now been acquired by Symantec. And he kind of showed me the ropes of like what a PM even does, what kind of their day-to-day life looks like, how they incorporate both tech and business and other aspects too, like data science, design. So I really liked that intersection and just kind of fell in love with that, and then moved forward into other internships and now my current role.
Awesome. It's great to hear all of your experiences. I guess my next two questions actually will be focused on more of the interview process. So my first question would be more around, how did you find success in getting that first initial interview as a college student or as a new grad? And what do you recommend new grads to do when applying to APM programs at tech companies?
I can go first again. So the two-part question. So first part, how did I get my first interview? It was definitely a very long process and a lot of waiting. I'm not sure what the other panelists had their experiences like, but I had a list of 50 to 60 companies that I had shortlisted that might have APM programs after doing so much research online. And I was like, do they have new entry-level grad roles? Like, they were good, reputed companies, big names. And there's quite a lot of articles online, I think, about just entry-level PM roles, because there's a lot of people looking for them, and it's very competitive. So there was like APM programs from Google, Facebook, and like a bunch of other companies. So once I got kind of that list going, it was honestly like, when do these applications come out? What kind of applicant are they looking for? And I think I might just address another question that was asked in the chat, whereas how does a product management role change based on the company, or is it different in companies? it's very different based on the company you're at. So me being a product or being in product at Visa is very different than maybe what someone would be doing at Google or Facebook. The concept is very similar. You are working with products in a sense, and you need to love that. But it can be very different because there are technical roles, there are technical PM roles, as Deb was mentioning earlier, and there are business PM roles. A technical PM role, you will be required to maybe have a software engineering background or know so much more about computer science, have taken those courses yourself, because a lot of your engagements probably have to do with tech and development teams. For a business PM role, it's good to have that technical expertise, because I think all products are using tech in some way or the other, but you can still know a lot more on the business side or get in with a very different kind of degree, but customize your approach in for what you think would suit the role. So I had a background in cognitive psychology. I did software engineering internships, but I don't think I was too vested in, coding. I don't think I did as much of it as other people who maybe had a computer science degree. So when I applied into technical PM roles, that was definitely a hard sell. So they would want to know, like, okay, which CS courses have you taken, and what background do you have? Are you comfortable with these languages? I think a good thing about Visa is that you can be technically or business driven, and they'll consider you for both, because there's a lot of diversity in the products that are offered through Visa. So I was kind of able to sell myself at any company I was interviewing at as more human focused or consumer focused rather than, oh, I'm tech or business. Because you are selling to a client. That client is probably a human being. And if you understand them well, you'll be able to sell a product. And that's usually what companies care about, is how you come up with ideas. Are you creative? And that's what they're looking for in the interview process as well. So a lot of it is emailing in those companies for referrals. So if you know people at companies, it definitely helps to put your interview on the top of the pile. There are so many people who will apply for APM roles. It's hard to even get your resume looked at. So if you have connections, please use them. Definitely reach out on LinkedIn. Ask what a role. Or if I reached out to Facebook RPM, I would be like, hey, what does your day-to-day look like? What kind of products do you work on? How much flexibility do you have in a Facebook RPM role to actually give in your ideas? Or do they not really listen to you because you're just an entry-level role? So just see what your learning capabilities are and what you can do at a particular company, but definitely start emailing people, get those referrals in, and honestly apply into as many places as you can. Change up your resume a little bit, get it reviewed by many people, keep talking and keep networking as much as you can. So that would be my takeaway.
I think to add on top of what Juhi just said, there's the role changes depending on the company that you're looking at, where you're looking at, all of the above. It's really easy to kind of get discouraged sometimes when you see a lot of like roles that just don't fit what you want to be doing, or if sometimes they look a little bit too experienced. Don't be. There's a lot of roles out there that are more new grad level or APM focused, which stands for like associate product manager, which is more of like the newer grads or less experienced product managers. That's like one piece of advice I have, where just really challenge what you see out in the world. Take advantage of like your internships to try things that might not just be your cup of tea, but really build like that skill set. The thing that I have about the actual interview, you won't just wake up one day with like a product mindset. Like it's not something that just comes naturally. It is something that you will have to develop. And there are so many podcasts, so many newsletters that you could read out there that will kind of help you build that product knowledge. And in the interview stage, like you are really like that thing that's just taking in all this information. So really take advantage of like all the materials out there. There's a couple of podcasts that you can always listen to. Product School is also a great resource to kind of just build like that product thinking and product mindset. The second thing I have about interviews is there's also a lot of books out there and a lot of different frameworks. You'll probably hear about circles or all these different things that come out of cracking a PM interview or Decode and Conquer. frameworks are awesome. They're a great way for you to kind of get started on how to approach a PM interview and how to kind of talk through it. But also be careful to not be too rehearsed. Like there will be questions that every interview will ask you around, what's your favorite product? You'll be answering this question thousands and thousands of times, both in your bedroom as you're practicing, but also in front of these interviewers. And it's really important to kind of have that fine line of being rehearsed, but also showing your passion. Really pick something that when you're answering a question like that, like really pick something that is your favorite product. Don't just do it because it looks good on paper. Like there's a lot of like that fine lines that you have to kind of tread carefully. And that's something that kind of stuck really well with my interviews, where I feel like I really liked the roles I was applying for and really wanted to be part of that team. So I would save my, I guess, like throwaway interviews for like earlier in my process, so I can just kind of practice those interviews. And then for like the ones that I really wanted to, I'd scale them out like or later in the game. So those are the advice I have about interviews.
Yeah, I can jump in and kind of add a little bit more. So I kind of also have a few pieces of advice for interviewing. So for those of you who are just starting out and just trying to get your first round interview, kind of my biggest piece of advice would be to have a very well tailored and well crafted resume that is for the role that you are applying for. So it kind of, so as Juhi and Shri have said, the PM role changes from company to company. Therefore, your resume should also be slightly different when you apply to from company to company as well. Some of them that are more technical, for example, if it's a more technical PM role, if you've developed like an app on the side or like a side project, talk about the technologies and the languages you use, but also ways you can scale your project, user profiles and user personas. If you're applying to a more business PM role, I would talk more about the customer needs, product market fit for this side project. So kind of tailor your experiences to match what the role is. So that's one of my big pieces of advice. My second kind of piece of advice, although it's optional many times, but it's strongly suggested, is kind of a well-crafted cover letter. I know it's becoming like obsolete and stuff, but a cover letter can really help show your personality in ways your resume can't. So again, have one that is tailored to each role at each company. I would highly suggest that as well, if that's an option for your application. And then I do have to say, I do agree with Juhi. Getting a referral would definitely help you, just help elevate your profile with recruiters and with hiring managers. So if you can get a referral, that would be really, really helpful for your profile. In addition to kind of once you've already started interviewing, I know like in the first round, it's typically like a phone screen. I would kind of make sure you've researched the company well and researched what their values are, what their vision is, what the product you're going to be working on is, the product team, what their dynamic is like. So that is something I would absolutely recommend you do and study well before your interview, so you can have answers to questions like why Adobe, why Google, or why insert X company name here. Why would you be a good fit for this role? So again, having those answers tailored for your company would really, really help. So that's kind of like my overall for the first part of interviewing. So just like getting past like resume screens and phone screens.
I can
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to add some more tips for some of the questions that I've been seeing pop around people who are already in industry. I wasn't already in industry, but the way that I did end up getting my first PM interview was by leveraging places where I'd already worked. So I reached out to Vimeo, where I did an internship, and they were like, no, sorry, talk to us in 10 years. Like, we don't have entry-level PM roles. And I was like, cool. Reached out to Apple, well, not reached out. I was working at Apple, and so like talked to my recruiter about potentially looking at PM-related opportunities. They basically didn't have them. So they have something else that I think someone already answered in the chat, but it's kind of like a TPM type role. And that is focused a lot more on execution, making sure like bugs are scheduled to be fixed, like timelines are all aligned so that you don't have any slip ups when you're delivering on a project. Like you're very much the person who keeps the team organized and on schedule and on track and efficient. And as a product manager, sometimes you do end up doing that as well. But just like in the case of the UX design role versus the product management role, it's usually not your core function. And as a PM, like you'll quickly learn that you just do things that you need to do if no one else is doing them. But oftentimes, like the TPM role is a lot more like organization based than product focused. But anyways, yeah, so that wasn't my first PM interview either. I had applied for a SWE role at Google the previous year, and the recruiter had reached out again a year forward, asking me to interview for the SWE internship. And I basically just asked her, like, is there any way that I could be considered for the PM role instead? And she was super straightforward, and she was like, can you send me a PM focused resume, like an updated resume, pretty much like implying that the current resume wasn't really fit for the PM role. And that was totally fair. Like Nikita said, you really want to make sure that, or someone said this, you really want to make sure that you tailor your experiences for both the company you're applying, but also the role you're applying. And if you're applying for multiple roles, like create 2 resumes, there's nothing wrong with that. One tip that I got was that on my PM resume, I really wanted to highlight, if you're in college, club experiences. I was an RA, put that on there. Anything that showcases leadership and your ability to get a group kind of wrangled and in shape for whatever task it is that you're trying to get them to accomplish, whether that's like literally as informal as being like a camp counselor and an RA, or like a project that you built at a hackathon, or like some tech week camp. So that was really important. So I sent that resume in and got myself like a PM interview as well as a SWE interview for the following summer. And yeah, so I think that the only other thing that I wanted to quickly mention was on the topic of building product sense, don't wait until you get an interview to start learning everything about product management, because there's just literally no, like you might just get yourself like in a bad situation and feeling overwhelmed. What I would suggest doing is, like, even today, think about the apps and the products you're using. Think about like the non-technical products that you're using, like a hair straightener. Like, what is the user need that that product is meeting? And it's something that can take like a minute even, just like on a walk. Think about what are the different habits that you've like picked up. Like, why are you doing them? What kinds of products are sticky? Why does company X do, like, that's very not specific. Think about like YouTube and YouTube TV. Like, why did they raise their price? Just start thinking about things that you're noticing in a product sense. And also really, really try to start reading tech news and listening to tech podcasts and getting your feet wet into the whole world of tech. And listen to opinions, but make sure that you're able to formulate your own. A lot of times tech interviews will include random strategy questions like, should Uber sell Uber Eats and focus solely on like ride sharing? And you really want to make sure you're not just parroting somebody else's opinion, but that you're able to like look at tech analysis, look at tech news, and kind of make your own sort of opinion on different directions that companies and like the tech world should take.
Yeah, I think all that was really great advice. I have just one more point to add to Nishta is that, as you mentioned, what happened to me was I let interviewing for PM roles to the very last minute. It was fall and I was like, okay, now I'm going to start reading Cracking the PM interview just to learn about what PM is. And then I have my Uber APM interview in 2 weeks and my Google APM interview in 3 weeks. That was definitely not ideal, because one thing you have to understand is I was working as a software engineer and software engineering intern before that, and very much deeply involved in just very coding and techie type stuff. Then I realized, like, for PM and PM roles, it's very much business focused and design focused. So you have to really know the vocabulary in order to crack these interviews. Things very simple to me that sound very simple now was things I never knew about when in my senior year. For example, what is a user persona? What is a user journey? What are products? Because I use Venmo and YouTube and Yelp all the time. But as Nisha mentioned, you have to think about it in a way where you're like, why did they ship this feature? What was the thought process behind it? And I think one of the great books to get started is Cracking the PM Interview. But on top of that, there's also a lot of things that you can just read and learn. And also, I think the best way that I got my feet really wet was going through a bunch of hackathons. People who know me know this. I went to like 15 plus hackathons during my college. And I think everything I learned about product was through there. Because when you're creating your own side project, that's the most easiest way to understand how to think about a product end to end. So for example, I'm building a job tracking tool for students currently. So I start with the user. Who are my users? Students. What does their journey look like? What are their pain points? Then you prioritize the pain points, and then you choose a feature to build before starting to code. 2 years ago, if you told me that, I was like, oh, that sounds like jargon. Like, why would you want to go through all that process? Just start coding. It was very much an engineer's mindset than a product mindset. But then I realized in the real world, to create something of value, of business value, you need to go through the process of talking to your stakeholders, understanding your users, prioritizing the features, and only then starting to code. So that's something I took, I guess, a year to normalize into and like understand. But I wish I knew that earlier when I was interviewing, so I would know a lot of the questions that were directed to me, such as like, which is your product? Who are your users? What does the user journey feel like? So I think understanding those terms and thinking about that earlier is better. So to all the juniors and sophomores out there who want to break into this role in your senior year, really start reading these books earlier so you can take like that 1 year to think and understand this this aspect of PM. But yeah.
That was all really solid advice. Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. My next question is more around how do you find yourselves navigating power structures in a male-dominated industry, especially as a product manager working cross-functionally with multiple stakeholders at once? Sri, would you like to go first?
Yes. There's two ways that I've kind of thought through this. There's like a proactive way and a reactive way. The proactive way that I've found success in is by having like a program plan from the start of a project where you're really setting expectations for every person that's on that team. There's a couple of things that are helpful there. One, you're kind of holding people accountable. Part of being a product manager is that you're the commander of the ship, but you have multiple people kind of working, developing on your team. So there's a lot of just like people management and accountability that's held there. So by having like a very written out program plan that kind of spells out the expectations is very, very helpful. And that's something that I've been always kind of going back to kind of show and set those expectations. The reactive way, and I guess I'm kind of reading the question more as like some conflict happened, how do I kind of take charge of that conflict? There's a reactive approach that I've been taking a lot, especially nowadays when we are in this remote world and it's easy for us to kind of misread the situation. There's no more body language that we can kind of rely on. The reactive way is honestly just being very upfront about it. I have regular one-on-ones with a lot of the executives on my team, but also a lot of like the male executives on purpose, just because there have been conflicts in the past, there have been escalations that kind of may have happened, and I really want to be upfront about it. So whenever I see something happening, we have those like very upfront, very blunt conversations. They're hard. There's no way to kind of avoid the difficulty that these conversations kind of can be like. It kind of just comes with practice, and it kind of comes with like having like that allyship and that relationship building that you're doing. The other part of the reactive side is being an ally for a lot of the people around you, especially these newer people who kind of join the team, especially again in the remote world, but also newer people who are minorities, people of color, women, etc., where you can kind of be like that ally and use your platform to kind of help support them, especially in the workspace where it's hard for you to navigate it, it's hard for other people to navigate it, and really kind of being that person will help in those situations.
Sorry. That was great. Thank you. I definitely agree with everything that you said. I find myself using those tactics at work as well. Juhi, would you like to comment or add a comment?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the male dominated part, it is a male dominated industry. I think tech in general is male dominated. What I found, and I was very fortunate, but I think since we have this chat going, I hope you guys take advantage of it. Reach out to other females in the industry. Reach out to other females who've done well for themselves, who you can seek out for mentorship. And very rarely have I reached out to someone and them either dismiss me or not respond. I have always gone in with this curiosity and said, I really admire your profile. I think you've done so well for yourself. How do you tackle these things? And it's good to have and create a support system in your workplace and externally, and that female network specifically, where you can address different situations that maybe a male employee may not encounter. And it's important to have that. It's important to understand it. Also, when you're younger, you're not really in charge of as many people. I think as an APM, you're learning a lot more, and your ability to learn is really tested because it's such a curve, because you're given so much information at once. And I think in the process of that, be open, and you will receive a lot of different kinds of experiences. You will learn so much, but at the same time, if you don't have that mentorship, it's hard to filter out what's necessary and what's unnecessary, and what is a good tactic of dealing with something versus not. So consistently have those conversations, and you shouldn't dismiss male employees. I mean, you should definitely keep reaching out, keep in contact, have those mentors. Mentors in general, super helpful. But yeah, create a strong network of people you trust to guide you through things, and people who've done well for themselves that you genuinely look up to, and are just kind people. I found that since I'm in a rotational program, there are people on my team who are a step above me and at my manager's level who I can talk to so easily. There's nothing stopping me from setting up a coffee chat with those people, even if they don't reach out to me, because a lot of people are very busy in their own work schedule. It's not that they don't care about you as a new grad or anything like that, but maybe they don't recognize they need to have a one-on-one with you, or the first time you introduce yourself, they're like, oh yeah, like she's doing well. But definitely like keep following up, keep those connections up, even in previous internships. If you've made good mentors, don't let them go. Like keep them there. They've known you from the start. They've known you since you were, I guess, so young in your career and trying to learn more. They'll see your growth, they'll recognize it, and they'll advise you adequately in the way you'll understand. So I would say network and keep your network.
Can I add something to Juhi's point real quick? The mentorship part is so critical. Something that that's been working really well for me as well is during the feedback session, where we, every once a year you go through like a feedback session with your manager and your team. But the thing that's been really helpful with like leveraging your mentors is by sharing like a professional development plan. Like I think just investing in a plan that is very explicitly spelling out what your plans are for the next year, the next 3 years, especially if you're trying to pivot roles. I saw a couple of comments around data engineers pivoting into product, or engineers pivoting into product. Like spelling that out on like in a formalized way, sharing that with your mentors, having that relationship, getting that feedback, and being very explicit about it is super, super helpful, especially since these mentors are people who know you and have been in the field for years longer. So just really take advantage of that kind of network.
Yeah, I can add to that. I would say that I think, especially for product, having people on your side is super important, just because you'll be interfacing with a lot of people to get work done, not just customers and stakeholders externally, but within the company. You'll want to have engineering by your side, you want to have marketing by your side. So if you're not someone who can interface with people well, that's something you might want to work on. And I think a lot of people make the distinction between, oh, male employees, female employees, this and that. With everything that's going on in the world, I really think I want to stress on the fact that allies are very important, but also to understand that if it's not working in a company, it's okay to leave or let go, or find a company that fits your culture more. Just because a company has a bigger name, and you go into a team and you find the culture is toxic and you're not liking it for a few months, I definitely suggest looking into finding a place or a company where you can find a better fit. And as mentioned, for product, the product and the company is very important. I've seen in a lot of like business to business B2B companies, it can be very you're not interfacing with customers as much. Your stakeholders and your users are other businesses. Maybe that as a culture you're not liking it. Maybe you want to move to a more B2C company, more app focused company, where you're working with consumer facing products such as Yelp or Venmo. And I think companies do differ in cultures based on the industry they're in. So this is something that I wish I did before, was research more on the role that I'm getting myself into. Because once you're stuck in a product as a product manager and you don't like the product yourself, you're not going to be able to drive it forward, because you're not passionate about it. And also you'll find it harder to find allies in the company, such as managers or people in power, to support you through that process. So yeah, that's something I really encourage you doing, is to find a product you like and industry you like, and then going after PM roles in that product or industry.
Super awesome. Thanks for sharing, Deb. I think we're at the last 15 minutes of our call, so we can take some audience questions as well. I have some noted down here, but please keep adding them as you go. Shibani asked, could we reach out for future questions, coffee chats, mentorship? Definitely. I will send out the recording of this event with everyone's socials attached, so that was definitely a yes. Ritu asked, what's your advice on keeping in touch with your network over the years? Does anyone want to take that?
I just wanted to quickly say that one thing that I've actually realized was there were a couple people who I was giving advice to, I think last summer, a couple months ago, about PM roles. And then a handful of them, I want to say like 2 of them, reached back out to me to tell me about how they had like either secured a PM role or like hadn't, but chosen to go down a different path. And that just made me feel very fulfilled and like made me personally invested in kind of their journey, and allowed us to kind of sustain our relationship, even though beforehand, like we like didn't really know each other. Maybe like they reached out to me because they were a friend of a friend. And I realized that for me too, the people who I've consistently like kept in touch with over the years have been people who I've I don't know, like either I've asked them for a favor and then I've like followed up once something came out of that favor, or I've somehow like kept them updated on my like current journey. And that definitely didn't happen with everyone who's helped me throughout the years, but the people who I was able to like maintain a good relationship with, it was always because I went back to them with some sort of follow-up, some sort of like appreciation for what they have done, and like some sort of thank you that went just beyond our initial conversation. And so I think that that's always like a good way to stay in touch with someone who's helped you. Just follow up with them a year later, tell them how their advice like shaped your journey, whether like you ended up doing what they said or you didn't.
Really solid. I have another question from Neelam asking, how do you find the right mentors and ask them to be your mentor long term?
Yeah,
I think I was just trying to, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just trying to type up a response to that, but I'll just quickly say it. One thing I did is I am still in touch with my very first mentor from the industry. I think one really good thing that happened is that I used to be part of meetups, and he was taking over for the meetup group that I was trying to join on. It was an AI meetup group, and that's how I met him. And I asked for an internship right there. But what I did is I was someone who was always attending forums and events, and I got to meet a lot of different people from the industry. So after he took over that meetup group, he wanted more speakers. And I think I helped him out and connected him with a Stanford professor of cognitive psychology or cognitive science. And I kind of set up this meeting in a sense, and the meetup happened with him. So it's kind of helping your mentors back. Even if you leave a company, if you know and take interest in their lives or their projects that they're doing, it's kind of that exchange, because they are providing you with a lot of advice and leadership and guidance, and maybe even roles and opportunities. You should be able to provide something back, and you definitely can. Like, take advantage of the fact that you've networked and met so many people, or you know a lot of younger people. If they have openings and you already have a job, definitely push some of your friends' resumes their way. Like, learn to help back. So that definitely helps mentorship experiences.
Definitely. Awesome. Malika has a question around what do you recommend doing during your freshman or sophomore year in college, if you think you're interested in product?
Yeah, I can answer that. I think I touched upon that before. One thing I would really mention that I already mentioned before was start maybe thinking of how to work on as many side projects as you can throughout your course of your college career. I think I was personally very interested in design, so I did a lot of side design projects, even though I wasn't as good as coding in my freshman year when I was just learning to code. So that's how I got my feet wet with creating a bunch of websites, giving it to people, asking their feedback on the website, etc. And then what happened was I got obsessed with creating projects. And if you ask people who know me, I am always working on something on the side, and each of my side projects has taught me something that I didn't know before. So one thing what happened was when I was interviewing for Uber, they have like this thing where they ask you to do a week-long project to come up with a Uber feature, and that's what a screening stage is, even before you get the phone interview. So I think the way I was doing my side projects before, this almost came naturally to me. I thought of an Uber feature, created a draft, created prototypes, and I sent the deck over. It was very simple for me. So I think the reason I got to that level was because I was iterating on projects all throughout the time that you have, regardless of your classes, because your classes teach you how to code, they teach you how to understand the basics, fundamentals of CS or psychology, but they don't really teach you how products and stuff work in the real world. So I definitely suggest doing that. And as mentioned by the previous speakers before, I'd say from your freshman, sophomore year itself, just like read a lot about tech, like subscribe to as many newsletters and try to like soak in the knowledge, because initially it might seem like a lot, but slowly easing into it really helps in the long run, because by the time you're a senior, you have all this wealth of knowledge about different industries. And one thing another very important thing I'd suggest looking into is don't look at tech very singularly as, oh, it's driven by software engineers working on tech projects. I think that's what I thought of as a freshman. The way to look at it is that software or tech is a business, and there's different ways that tech can be used to solve problems. So for example, Visa has fintech products. NVIDIA has deep learning focused GPU products. Slack is a tool. So, and they're all in different industries. One is the future of work, one is finance, one is hardware. So I think finding that interest and passion in a domain, and then researching on products and industries or companies in that domain from a very early stage would really help you in your senior year.
Yeah, one more thing I do want to add, in terms of like side projects and for people who are freshmen, sophomore, like earlier in college, one thing I would recommend, in addition to the more technical side projects or apps or websites you create, or just reading or as others have said, just reading about just tech news and product in general, I would also just recommend just gaining as many broader experiences as possible as you can. It doesn't even necessarily have to be tech related. Just having a more like well-rounded college experience in general can promote you in that PM role. So kind of just giving like my personal examples, I was a part of just a purely business consulting group for a couple of semesters when I was a freshman. And that gave me stuff to talk about in addition to my technical side projects. Or if you're interested in kind of broadening horizons, I would obviously recommend doing a study abroad or traveling abroad. That also, I think, helps you build a more well-rounded resume in addition to the technical aspects of things. So yeah, I would also, in addition to the technical stuff, definitely recommend just pursuing everything you may be interested in or passionate about, as that just makes you a more holistic candidate when it comes to PM interviews.
And wear a lot of hats. So all of like that well-roundedness that you're getting is going to help you with like your career as well. I think just everything that was said, just one more thing is recruiters are your best friends. So really network with those recruiters. That's kind of how I kind of accidentally found myself at the PM internship, where I was just telling this recruiter what really just made me happy and caused me joy. And just through him was how I kind of got introduced to like a PM role in the first place. So it's sometimes easy to forget that PM or recruiters are on your side, but they really want you to be successful, and they really want you to be successful at their company. So really take advantage of like that piece of the network as well.
Totally agree. I guess this question is more for the whole panel. How do you navigate getting into product management with just, let's say, SWE experience or a different experience in tech?
I can speak to the SWE experience again. So I'd say CS at college is very consuming because you're taking all these classes and they take up a lot of time. So I personally didn't have as much time to think or look into business and other stuff, or econ and other things that I wish I would learn from college. So the way I went about it is freshman, sophomore year, focused on building CS projects, doing a bunch of internships, focusing on CS. but then slowly making that change into reading up more stuff when you have more free time, maybe over summer. Maybe also another way is if you're interning at a company or you know someone in your network is working as a PM or working in a more customer facing role, I'd say definitely reach out to them and do that one-on-one session with them and ask them what do they do in their daily job. And one thing I found really helpful was in my internship at Tesla, I was not told to shadow a PM, but he was literally sitting next to me, so I would always listen to him talk on the phone and go about his day. So I literally picked up a bunch of things that PM do just by looking at him. And in my interviews in my senior year, I literally mentioned that, oh, I was shadowing a PM just by like sitting next to him. So I think you have to like soak it in slowly instead of just at once being like, oh my God, I want to go into PM and I have to learn about business and strategy and products. So I think that's one way to slowly ease into it. But I think the others can speak to other their experiences with other majors.
Yeah, I think some of the best PMs are definitely some of the ones who actually worked as an engineer on that product. It's also an easier transition, especially if you're trying to transition into a product manager role where you are in the gutters, kind of working on that technology, working on that tool. I too came from like a software engineering background, so it was easier for me to kind of have that relationship with the engineers and transition into a PM. So shared some of the same things that Deb kind of went through.
Definitely. I think one more question I think we can take before we wrap up. What has been one of the biggest challenges you're facing as a PM working from home? And how do you navigate it, I guess?
The first thing that came to mind is just like as a PM, you're constantly in meetings and you're constantly trying to like build like rapport with people around you. And I think for someone who had at least been able to do half of her role in person, that was kind of an okay transition. But in 2 weeks, I'll be starting on a new team and like rotating and trying to make all of these connections and that like just talking to people who I might run into during the course of my time on the team, just like trying to get people to learn about me and who I am and not just kind of like fade into the background. That's definitely been one of the things that I'm like most like, I don't know, scared about rotating to a new team in work from home environment. I think it's just like, as a PM, you really, really, really need to make sure that you have established like a good relationship with various stakeholders. And even back before this COVID era, when we were in person, I had some people who I was working remotely on like on a different side of like the country. And even just the difference between my conversations with them on VC before I actually visited them and met them in person versus after, it made such a huge difference. So yeah, definitely the biggest challenge is meeting people and establishing connections remotely.
I miss the people so much. I didn't realize how many decisions or alignment questions and answers were given by just like turning around in your chair and talking to the person behind you. That is definitely has taken the biggest toll on a lot of this. I think a way that at least like people at Slack have been kind of tackling this is by doing a lot of random where we realize that, oh, this Slack thread is becoming too long, or oh, we've been talking in circles about this, let's jump on a Zoom, and really just suggesting those informal methods of communication. That's been super helpful. The other is we've been doing a lot of drop-in and coffee and chat things. I do that with quotes because we're never doing any of those three. We're just kind of just sitting at each other, watching each other kind of type on our computers. But there's something about just having someone kind of next to you going through the same thing during a typical workday just is so comforting. And especially when you can kind of like talk out loud, rubber duck with them. Some people have started investing in like whiteboards behind them. So kind of like just drawing out those things has been helpful from like missing the people aspect.
Yeah, I can add. I joined my team completely remote and my product is so technical. I complain about this all the time. It's like, even if I was in the office, I would probably take 2 months to understand it, but it would have been so much easier to get an engineer in the room and let them explain to me. So like just giving you some context, I've had only probably 2 30-minute meetings with my manager in the past 2 months, just because he's so overloaded. And I'm like, and the rest of the team is in Canada and China. And which is fine, but their time zones are completely different and they're overloaded too. So it's like I have no one to go to ask information. I have not much to learn about the product because the product is so nascent that there's not much documentation around it. And now I'm tasked with creating a product roadmap and a product deck. So it's definitely really been a struggle, but I think Slack has really helped. So it's like almost like if you can't join Zoom meetings with people, you can definitely keep Slacking, and I think people do respond. So that's been helpful. But I will definitely agree that one thing that has helped is finding the people who are in your product, who are in the product that make decisions, and having them aligned by your side, either by showing them your expertise quickly, by showing some way of understanding the product, either by quickly making up your own decks which show an understanding of the product, which has helped. But I agree, it's a complete struggle, and it's not been easy at all. I'm still in the process of, I think it's been 2 months and I'm still learning about how our product even works.
All right, I think we're a bit over time, so I wanted to just quickly wrap up and say thank you to everyone who has joined, all 110 of you. It's been a great panel, and special thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights and your advice. Please make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We're at the Costart, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having us, Mom.
Thank you.
And Deb.
We can hang along for a bit more if anyone has any other questions. The speakers and everyone can feel free to leave, but
yeah, definitely.
I gotta go, but if anyone has any questions I can help answer with, I'm sure Monty will send out our information. But it was great talking to you guys. Bye, and good luck with everything.
Thanks, Nishta.
Also, for anyone hanging out, one thing I wanted to add was joining communities really helps. So make sure to find a way to join us or reach out to us, or even find similar communities that exist which are popping up in PM or in software to kind of help with your transition into PM or learning more about PM. But yeah, with that, also the people who are here, I wanted to add, we're also having another panel in a few weeks, similar, but we're chatting with female founders. So it's a female founder roundtable. We will send out that information via our newsletter and via email to whoever attended this. So keep a lookout for that.
Hey everyone, thank you for this amazing panel and for organizing it. Deb, I had a question for you especially because I am starting full-time on Monday. So just completely remote with the new team. And so I wanted to know like what advice you have for me in terms of like getting those one-on-ones and FaceTimes, because I'm sure my manager is going to be quite overwhelmed as well.
Yeah, sure. Are you joining a PM role specifically, or is it a different role?
So I worked at Microsoft for 2 summers, but this is going to be full-time and it's going to be a new team.
Oh, I mean, it definitely helps if you've worked at the company before. Like I've never worked at this company or in this domain at all. So that was definitely a little bit of climbing to do. But what I'd say is be patient, because it took me even like maybe 3 weeks to understand where our team is located. What does our team look like? Where are our decks and our docs? Because just my manager wasn't sending them to me instantly. He was also overloaded, but also us not being in the same room, it's hard to tell if he's understanding, if I'm understanding. So I'd say give it time. It will be a slower ramp up unless if there's someone specific on your team that's dedicated to being your mentor. I think Microsoft does a good job with that. So but other than that, I'd say you can be proactive by showing understanding, by, like I said, giving summaries each week to your manager and being like, okay, I understood this, but I didn't understand that. Could you help me with this if you have time? And also maybe try to squeeze in time with whoever's in your team. I know that I wasn't able to because everyone's so overloaded that one-on-ones only happened 2 months down the lane. So yeah, don't wait for that. I think I should have been more proactive earlier.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
But yeah, good luck with your role.
Thank you.
Also, there was a drop-in as to whether or not they can reach out over LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out over LinkedIn. It is not too invasive, if that was the question. But definitely drop in the message that you heard us on here, so we know where we're getting you from, so we know you'd have product questions.
Hi, ladies. My name is Habiba. Thank you so much for your responses and stuff. I have a kind of like a question how to transition into this. I had an offer to do a rotational finance program, but that kind of got cut with the whole COVID and other stuff. So I'm kind of open to trying to do APM roles. I had always thought about this even like since last summer and stuff, but I don't know how to get into that. I graduated with a business administration degree, not necessarily technical and stuff, but I've always been curious about products, and I'm always like one of those people who are asking more questions than just what the numbers are saying. I don't know whether you have any advice in terms of like getting into APM roles. I know you kind of touched upon it in terms of like not being like super technical and stuff, but I don't know whether you guys have any advice on how to leverage my experiences and getting into APM.
Sure. I think hopefully in this panel we covered a lot about breaking into PM roles from different majors and different backgrounds. So hopefully that advice was helpful. But if not, we can send a list of links and readings on the email that we send out to everyone. Hopefully that will be helpful. But in general, for your question, I'd say, as mentioned in the panel, list maybe the companies that you'd like and industries you're looking to break into, and then see how your prior experience can help you with those interviews. Or if not, then you'd have to do the reading and research to understand the products in those companies and industries. So with the business background, I think you're in a good place. A lot of PM roles are very customer and business focused, so you can look at those roles. But if you're looking at a more technical PM role, you'd have to bridge that gap by doing your own studying and research. But I'd say, yeah, start by maybe making a list of companies and roles that you're interested in, and then talking to more people at that company who can help you break into those roles, etc. Hope that helped.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think we can get going now. Thank you everyone for joining. This was a great panel. Thank you to the panelists and everyone with their questions. It was a really productive panel. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Everyone, thank you.